week, our Warhawk family entered in 86 Master Sergeants into their senior NCO ranks. How about a round of applause? Could not be more proud of your families and supervisors and all the people that had a hand in that accomplishment. But I will tell you, just as I've done on many occasions, ladies and gentlemen, there is no magical rank. You don't arrive. You don't suddenly put on a rank or a stripe and have it all figured out. And that's in part why we're here today. So, I've read the National Security Strategy multiple times from cover to cover. It talks about a lot of threats. It talks about a lot of things that we're facing today, a lot of challenges. Russia, China, cyber, North Korea, Al-Qaeda, terrorist cells, foreign, domestic. You know what it doesn't say? It doesn't talk about our greatest adversary. The adversary that's killing more airmen than any of those bad actors combined. What is that? Suicide. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I think part of this, part of our opportunity as leaders at all levels, is having that frank, open dialogue, that conversation. Last year, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Goldfein, had all of us wing commanders, took us together and posed a lot of tough questions. One of the challenges he threw to all wing commanders was that you will go down to BMT at Lackland. You will go see where we make airmen, where we create the next generation of warfighter. You go see and re-blue yourselves and your teams and understand the heart of what it is to be an airman at the gateway to the Air Force. And in the next breath, he said, when you see that and re-blue and re-energize your staff, I want you to go back to your respective wings and figure out how they go that day on that bomb run, being filled with so much hope, to sometimes days later being filled with a sense of hopelessness. And that's not just a charge and a challenge to those wing commanders. Everyone sitting in this room has that very same challenge. So I want you to think about that today. I want you to think about that challenge and think about the fact that we've signed up to defend this great country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that includes that adversary, suicide. So, Warhawk family, it is my distinct honor to introduce another family member, the 2018 Air Force Spouse of the Year, Miss Kristen Christy. How about a big round of applause?
Life is a tough teacher. We get the test first, and then we learn the lesson. I'm here this morning to talk to you a little bit about the tests that I've gone through in my life and the lessons that I've learned. Because silence does us no good, and I'm ready to talk about it. So I grew up in the Air Force. I'm a product of the Air Force. We moved every 2 years. My dad was intel. We lived here in San Antonio. He was part of basic training, 3701, lead, follow, or get out of the way. We had Christmas and Thanksgiving at the dining hall. It was a great tour here. So I'm glad to be back. But as we moved every 2 years, because my dad's command was at Electronic Security Command at Cali Air Force Base, two things that my brother and I learned, my parents instilled in us. If you get the chance, take it, and if it changes your life, let it. And we got embedded in our community, because you never know when that community comes back to help you. So whether it was Omaha, Nebraska, or Okinawa, Japan, or San Vito, Italy, or San Antonio, Texas, we got embedded in our community. We were here in the early 70s. There was no GPS. My brother and I would sit in the back seat with the Rand McNally map. And we would tell my parents where to turn. We got lost in our cities. Now, Okinawa, it's kind of hard to get lost, but we found some great places and people. And to us, that was our community. Community to each and every one of you means something different. It could be your church, it could be your unit, it could be your neighborhood, it could be your kid's school, it could be your Texas Hold'em group that you meet with once a month, right? Whatever your community looks like. But remember about that community, because today's talk is about community. I was so fortunate to have the experience to live overseas. I was a European brat and a Far Eastern brat. So in 1983, I know many of you probably weren't born then, in October of 1983 was a phenomenal month for me. It was 1 month out of 51 years. The beginning of October of 1983, I had the opportunity to play Steffi Graf in tennis. She was 98th in the world. She was 14, I was 15. I beat her. It was awesome. I had a plan for my life, but it was fantastic. She went on to be the #1 tennis player in women's tennis and changed the face of women's tennis before Serena Williams came on board. The second week in October, I won the DoD Golf Championship for all of the high schools in Germany. I beat the #1 boy by 5 strokes. I was really excited about that too. See, at 15 years old, junior year in high school, I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to tennis practice, go to my junior year in high school, and then go to golf practice because it was golf season. My parents did not make me do that. That was all me. I'm driven. I'm competitive. I still am. But I was driven. The last week in October, I was still on a high from beating Steffi Graf and beating the #1 boy in golf. I had a massive stroke on my right side. The prognosis was if I lived, I would not be able to walk again, and I would have some brain damage. That was if I lived. Getting embedded in our community, that's when they came alongside of us. My brother was 2 years younger. He had to stay in Germany. They had aerobacted me to Landstuhl. We were in Wiesbaden. But it was 6 days after the Beirut bombing of the Marine barracks. The neurosurgeons at Landstuhl were tag teaming in the hallway. They needed to get me out of there. My Sunday school teacher was a doctor. His roommate at the Air Force Academy was the #1 neurosurgeon in the Air Force, stationed at Wilford Hall. They aerovac'd me to Wilford Hall. I tell you, I took a picture the other day, a selfie with my silver streak, with Wilford Hall, the old Wilford Hall, in the background, and I sent it to my doctor. P.K. Carlton, he ended up retiring as the Surgeon General of the Air Force. And I said, I have very fond memories at Wilford Hall because my community came alongside of us. I knew how important our community was. I knew how deep my faith ran. I stand on a firm foundation of faith because I'm a daughter of the King. And that helped get us through. But more importantly, I also knew how strong I could be even at 15 years old. But that sense of community came back tenfold to help me and my family. It took me a year and a half to learn to walk again. I'm still pretty unsteady. I write with my left hand now. I don't take no for an answer. But it was because of our community. We did not do it alone. We are not made to do life alone. So my scholarships were taken away. I lost my identity. My identity was as an athlete. I was a good student, but I had plans. And then a detour came through. I went through depression. I told my parents, I voiced it. As we're driving down the Autobahn 125 miles an hour, I said, I want to open this door right now and jump out. And we got help. I got help. And my competitiveness came back. And a year and a half later, I walked across the stage for the first time without a cane or a walker to get my high school diploma. Even though my scholarships for athletics was taken away, I received a full scholarship because we were Texas residents to the University of Texas in Austin. I realized that I needed to get embedded in my community. My community, no matter where I lived in my life, was the military, even if we lived off base. And back then, not many people lived off base. Now, 70% I think live off base. But the military was my community. I went to the largest university population-wise in 1985. It was 85,000 students. Where would I find my community? At the ROTC building. I was not able to raise my right hand to take an oath of service. But I raised my left hand and said, I will volunteer. I will do what I need to do to serve my country without putting on the uniform. But my sense of community was at the ROTC building. So, there we go. So this was taken the year UT won the national championship in our burnt orange. But there was one guy at a party I didn't know. And I made a beeline straight to him because I'm an uber extrovert. And I know that I can walk into a room and I can suck the air right out of an introvert's lungs. So I have to be very careful. But I knew everyone else. So I went right up to him and I said, hi, I'm Kristen Anderson. He said, hi, I'm Dawn Christy. We can never get married. Do I take no for an answer? 5 months later, had a ring on my finger. 2 years later, we got married. I became Kristen Christy. And he became a Missileer. He was commissioned, became a Missileer. We went up to Grand Forks, North Dakota for 4 years. Great community to start a family. But it was all about community. Living on base. The base is like 17 miles away from town. That was our community. Our garage doors were open all the time. Our front doors were open. If we were on leave and the basement flooded like it sometimes did, our neighbors came alongside. After they cleaned theirs up, they would clean ours up. We loved our community, and we had our first son, Ryan, in Grand Forks. Then we get orders for Colorado Springs. I know I'm going to take one for the team, right? We've been there. It's a great community, great place to live. And he's stationed out at Falcon Air Station, which later becomes Schriever Air Force Base in 3 Sox. And he comes home in 1997 and says, you know what? I really think I need to separate from the Air Force. I've known nothing but the Air Force my entire life. You're going to get me involved in something else? I don't know how to adjust, right? I didn't wear the uniform, but I understand when you retire or separate, it's different. Your identity has changed. But he said, wait a minute, there's something called the Air Force Reserve. So he joined the reserve as a traditional reservist, and then they asked him to help stand up the 310th Space Group out of Schriever. So he became an AGR, and then flip-flopped to an ART, and an AGR. You know how that goes. If you're familiar with the reserves, they keep changing back and forth. And he became the squadron commander for 19 SOPs. So GPS, all of humanity, it's open source. It was fabulous. It was a great year, and it wasn't the Key Spouse program at the time, but I took on that role as the squadron commander's spouse, kind of key spouse. And I loved it because it was a sense of community. And in the reserve, it is, I think, a little more difficult to have that sense of community because you have so many people geographically separated that come in once a month or 3 weeks out of the year for their AT. But we wanted to have that sense of community. And he came home in 2003 as commander. He was asking my permission, but he knew what my answer would be. But this is where I think I fell in love with him all over again. And I truly understood what it meant to be a leader. He said, I have been tasked with getting volunteers to go to Baghdad on a deployment. And I don't feel right asking for volunteers unless my name is at the top of the list. That's when I understood a supervisor or manager says go, a leader says let's go. And he said let's go. He was the only one chosen. 2004, he went off to Baghdad. He was second in command of the Baghdad airport. So we heard about Toby Keith sleeping on his couch when he arrived, or meeting Donald Rumsfeld out on the flight line. We heard about the fun stuff. He didn't talk a whole lot about the other stuff. And we came to learn that those are called sacred spaces. He had sacred spaces that only he knew about, and the people he served with knew about. But I had sacred spaces too. We had 2 boys, and I did not want to burden him with what was going on at home. I had sacred spaces as well, but we communicated that he was different when he got back. And I didn't quite understand what was going on with that. But I knew we needed to communicate. Communication is so very important. I remember sitting in my living room in Okinawa, Japan, watching the American TV station, and Miss America was up. And one of the questions was, if you could have a superpower, what would that superpower be? And I answered, 4th grade, I answered, I want to be able to speak and understand every language in the world. I knew back then how important communication was. We think we speak the same language, but sometimes we don't. I learned that in 2005. Don had been home for about a year, and he was picked up for Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I thought, ooh, I'm going to learn other languages. MOS equals AFSC. I was going to learn Army E's, right? I'll tell you right now, F and G crosses all the services. We had a great year, but he was still different. He was an introvert to begin with. He got energy from within, right? He converted his energy from within. But he was different. He wasn't opening up. He was more secluded, staying out, he couldn't sleep. And then the hardest PCS we ever had was after Army War College. We were told we were moving to the Pentagon after Army War College. So we sold our custom home that we built in Colorado Springs, and we moved back to Colorado Springs after 11 months being gone. And that was really difficult. We had been embedded in our community in Colorado Springs, and we were gone for 11 months. We moved back, and we were trying to figure out how to jump back in. And I likened it to double Dutch jump rope, where you are keeping an eye on both of those ropes so you can jump in without tripping. We tripped. And in April of 2008, the coroner shows up at my house with 2 uniformed officers. Don had taken his life. Our boys were 12 and 14. I've heard of the word catatonic. I've read the definition. I've never seen it before until that night. My boys were catatonic, and when they told me, all I could think of was my poor boys. This is where our community comes alongside of us, because we were embedded in our community. But it hasn't been an easy road. Ben was 12, Ryan was 14. 8 years later, I received a voicemail from Ben, our youngest son, on his 20th birthday. Can you hear the abandonment in my baby's voice? My oldest son has been missing for almost 4 years, 1,435 days. The suicide triggered bipolar early. Bipolar typically presents itself in the early to mid-20s, and he was 16 when he was diagnosed. Don didn't know that. He got into meth and heroin. He ran away. I had to file a police report on him because he was writing checks off of my checkbook to drug dealers, and they were coming to my house. They totaled our car. We got him help. And he was clean, and he had his own business. He did concrete countertops. And one day he came to me and said, "Mom, there's a retreat in Hawaii, in Hilo, Hawaii, I want to go to learn self-sustaining farming, yoga, and meditation." For 4 months, he never showed up, he never applied. I went through his things 2 months after we found out that he never showed up, and he had books on how to disappear and how to change his identity. I pray that my son is on this side of heaven, and if he's not, I know that he's in good hands. Suicide is contagious. Both of my kids attempted. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at war. We are at war right now, and there is no room on the battlefield for strangers. What does your community look like? It can be one person. We are not made to do life alone. It can be a room full of people. Whatever it looks like, do not be silent. You've got a battle buddy. If you can tell your story, whether it's suicide, whatever your story is, we all have stories. We all have stories. And we cannot compare one story to another. We have all been through a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. You cannot compare your tragedy to my tragedy, but we can compare our numbers on the pain scale. Because life is a brutal teacher. You get the test first and then you learn the lesson. And how do we navigate and how do we tutor each other through that lesson? There's a country song, when you're going through hell, keep on driving. I challenge you to look through your rearview mirror because someone's coming right behind you and they're going through a hell. It may be a different hell, but they're going through hell and they need the lessons that you have learned. We can't always be there for each other during the test, but we can help navigate through those lessons. What else is contagious? A smile. A kind word. You all wear name tags. When you are out at a restaurant, I want you to use someone's name. They have a name tag on too. And if you don't know how to pronounce it, ask them. Because you're looking in their eyes, you see them as a human being, and it's very important. It is said that our names are music to our ears. Now, when my mom said my name and she used my middle name too, that was not necessarily music to my ears, right? But when other people use my name, I hold my head up high and I pull my shoulders back. They're seeing me for who I am. And we never know what battle people are waging in their life. But again, there is no room for strangers on that battlefield. So I want to tell you, we live in a world of acronyms, right? So there are a few acronyms that helped me and my family, what's left of it, get through. The first one, I told you, I don't take no for an answer. It just means next opportunity. Now I will say that sometimes no is an answer. Right? The TIs here will attest to that. That no is an answer. It just means next opportunity. When I was nominated for the Air Force Spouse of the Year, I looked through the terms of service and it said, 1, you had to be over 18. Check. 2, you could not be active duty yourself in the National Guard, Reserve, or active duty. 3, if your spouse, military member, was a reservist or National Guard, he or she had to be on Title 10 orders for 180 consecutive days. So I would say my new groom is a traditional reservist in the Air Force Reserve. One of the questions on the application was, what is a challenge you find as a military spouse? The just a reservist moniker. And I hear it on the reserve side too. Well, I can't do that, I'm just a reservist. But I made a business case. Because my husband is a traditional reservist does not mean that I am a traditional reservist spouse. I do not work on helping my community, my military community. I didn't take no for an answer. I turned in the application and boom. Out of 1,100 nominees, I was named Air Force Spouse of the Year. I didn't take no for an answer. It was their next opportunity to open that up. And effort never dies. Don put into place in 19 SOPs processes that are still going on today. His effort being an Air Force, in the Air Force, being an Air Force member, has not died. My effort at trying to be a good mom doesn't die. But I will tell you that I feel like I failed. I failed as a spouse, I failed as a mom, I failed as a community member. until someone told me what FAIL stands for. First attempt in learning, or further attempt in learning. It never means final attempt in learning. The Airman's Creed, the last sentence, I will not fail. That does not mean you will not make mistakes. We all do. You will not fail on the battlefield. You will not leave an airman behind. It just means first attempt at learning. And fear. Oh, fear has held me back from so many things. Fear is a liar, and it just means false evidence appearing real. And I have to remember that. I fear getting outside my comfort zone. Public speaking is not outside my comfort zone, like it is for so many people. But I want my comfort zone to become my escape room. I want to get outside that comfort zone because there are so many people that I can bring into my community and that I can be a resource for. I like 4-letter words, so I did play golf on Saturday. That was a fun 4-letter word, but free. Foster relationships energetically everywhere. Again, for an uber extrovert like me, you would think that it's easy, and it's not. It truly is exhausting. But it has come back tenfold to help me when I needed it the most, or help people within my sphere of influence. So I may not be able to help you personally, but I may be able to help someone in your realm, or you may be able to help someone in my sphere of influence. That's what networking and the free acronym is all about. And more importantly, hope. Hold on, pain eases. You know, some people say hold on, pain ends. You've heard that voicemail. You've heard my stories. My pain won't end, but it eases, and that's as a result of my faith in my community. Hold on, pain eases. So the next slide tells you a little bit about what people did for us, what our community did for us. They showed up. I remember every single person who was in my living room that night after the coroner left. 12 years ago. I remember every single person. And I will tell you, a proud moment for me was when I spoke here in February and I got a text message from a woman who was at my presentation, and she said, "Kristen, I'm going to show up because my friend from high school just took his life. And I'm driving 18 hours with my kids in the car. I baked casseroles, and I'm going to go see his parents." She showed up. She took the time out to show up. It doesn't have to be an 18-hour drive. It can be knocking on your neighbor's door and just being there. Because I guarantee you, they are not going to remember what you said. So this says do something, it doesn't say something. As human beings, we want to fix things. And a lot of time by fixing things, that's by saying something. I don't remember what they said. I will tell you that I do remember when people said things that hurt my feelings. And my feelings were raw at that time, a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. But they did something. My best friend and her boys were my boy's best friend. She took her kids out of school for 3 days, and they stayed with us. She slept in my bed. She slept on Don's side of the bed so it wasn't empty. Another friend of mine literally broke into my house the next morning, and she was making pancakes for my kids. She didn't ask, because I hate pancakes. I'm just going to say it. They were the best tasting pancakes I've ever had because I didn't want to be rude. 3 weeks later, it was Mother's Day, and who shops for Mother's Day, right? For the kids? My sister-in-law sent me roses for Mother's Day. Another friend of mine, the doorbell rang, and when that doorbell rings, even to this day, I kind of clench. It was a friend of mine who was at Army War College with us. They were stationed in Florida, and she showed up on my front doorstep with a suitcase. She didn't ask, she showed up, and she did something. Be intentional. So you thought you were going to be able to sit here today, but I'm giving you homework, okay? So tonight, before you go to bed, sometime tonight, I want you to be intentional. I want you to pull out your cell phone and scroll through your contacts. It's kind of like Facebook. I'm sure you have contacts that you haven't talked to them in a while, you just exchanged information. But I want you to scroll through your contacts, and I guarantee you that someone's name is going to jump out at you. And I want you to send a wave emoji or, hey, I'm thinking of you today. How are things going? 75% of you are going to get a text back that says, how did you know? How did you know I needed to hear from you? It's being intentional. I will pull over on the side of the road if someone comes to my thoughts or in my heart, and I will text them. Put on my hazards and text them. Because I know myself, and if I say I'll do that later, it doesn't happen. I forget. I want you to be intentional. My friends were intentional because typically after the first 30 days, people are very vigilant about calling and checking in on us and things like that. But after that, it wanes quite a bit. So I try and be intentional by putting in my calendar, text so-and-so. It's like throwing a dart at the calendar, just on a certain day. It doesn't have to be the anniversary. Preferably it's not the anniversary. I text them and say, how you doing? And it's been amazing because that's what our friends did to us. They didn't forget about us, and they still stayed within our community. And then use your resources. You all have so many resources here at Lackland, and please pull out your cell phones because I will have a slide up here with resources for you, and I want you to take pictures of those resources. Do not do life alone. Be each other's community. It's so important. So this is the slide. Feel free to take a picture. I want you all to know about them. And I've got more resources in a couple slides. But family advocacy. I've got the suicide hotline that's going to be up there. We've got mental health, military one source. You have resources, and a lot of these resources, no matter where you PCS, you're going to have resources. They are there to use. Whether you're in crisis or you're confused about something because a friend of yours is in crisis, what do you do? How do you fix it? How do you show up? How do you be intentional? How do you do something? Sometimes it's not what you do, but who you call on to do it for you. And it's these resources. So these are my resources. I talk about hope. Hold on, pain eases. These are my E. My husband, Sean, we met on Match.com. It works. And I'm a recruiter because he was in the Navy Reserve. He's wearing the blue uniform. He is my E. This is my 63rd speaking engagement in 12 months. All over the country. I'll be going to Thule, Greenland. Mildenhall's invited me. He's not able to make these trips with me. But he understands the value in telling our story and playing that voicemail. And he supports me doing that. I don't know many spouses who can live in the shadow of a previous life. But he is my E. And this is my son, Ben. He looks like Liam Hemsworth, doesn't he? He's cute. He's 23, turns 24 in September. He still struggles, but we just moved him to Edwards Air Force Base as a contractor working on the global hub. His clearance took a little bit of time. I'll admit that. Because he was in therapy. He had issues. He's a young man. Both of my kids tried to attempt. Their role model did. But he's doing really well, and he has found a tool to help him cope with anxiety, and it's called crocheting. I'm going, what's crocheting? He goes, it's crocheting for guys. He's going viral. He called me and said, Mom, I went viral. And I said, honey, go to the medical clinic. There's something for you there. But he goes, no, on Twitter I went viral. He had crocheted his girlfriend a tank top, and she broke up with him before he gave it to her, so he put it on Twitter to sell it. He got 500 orders for tank tops. He's like, Mom, the hobby I took up to help me with anxiety is causing me more anxiety. I said, what are you going to do about that? He says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you're in a frat. Well, they can't know that I crochet. He taught them how to crochet and hired them to be subcontractors to fulfill his order. I'm going, forget the aerospace engineering degree, go with the business. But he has found his community at Lancaster, California, and at Edwards Air Force Base, and he's gotten embedded in that community, and they've helped him a great deal. Oop, I went too fast. So we have over 1,500 days of observance. National Donut Day, National Ice Cream Day. I love ice cream. So when I was an athlete, I was in shape, and now my size is TLC, thick like cornbread. But who doesn't love cornbread, right? Especially with a little honey. One day I'll get in shape. But we have over 1,500 days of observance. We do not have a National Survivors Day. And so I've been working for 7 years, and I've been told that I will be in the White House next March 4th, and President Trump will sign an executive order to make March 4th a National Day for Survivors. If there's one day out of the year, one day out of 365 days, that people can hold their head up high and pull their shoulders back, I will take that day. If you feel empowered in one day out of the year, I prefer that it's 365 days out of the year, but it's March 4th because we put one foot in front of the other and we march forth and conquer. March forth and conquer. I want it to be every day for you. And there are days that it's hard to see. We've got our blinders on. We don't see the potential that we have within ourselves, and it takes our community to come alongside and say, you can do it, even when you don't feel like you can. When you really need to go to the gym and you don't feel like doing it, that's when you need to do it the most, right? But March 4th, if nothing else, I want you to wake up next March 4th, 2020, and remember to put one foot in front of the other in March 4th and conquer. But more importantly, together. I'm fat fingering. Can you go back to the last slide for me, please? I won't touch. Oh. So we talked about resources. There are a lot of resources here at Lackland. There are a lot of resources in our Air Force, within DOD, in our communities. I want to be a resource for you. So the Suicide Prevention Hotline, it has a lot of different names, but it's the same number. The Veterans Crisis Line, the Military Crisis Line, it's the same number. And if you're a veteran or active duty and you feel comfortable, then you press 1 and you'll go to someone who understands our community. Because it is a different language, isn't it? But my cell phone number, that is my personal cell phone number. You heard my son's voicemail. He called at 1:30 in the morning. I was asleep, my cell phone was off. I don't turn my cell phone off anymore. Text me, call me. I've had airmen from Little Rock, Arkansas call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I've been on the phone when I've been traveling with her or when I've been traveling, she called me. So as I was talking to her and keeping her on the phone, I was texting my husband because he doesn't turn off his cell phone anymore either. And we got a welfare check at Charleston. That's what I don't have all the answers. I'm not a licensed therapist. I feel like a SME in overcoming. But I guarantee you, I am not done with my tests. I have more tests coming down the line. And that's okay, because I'm going to learn a lesson. And I have a community alongside of me that has learned lessons that will help me. But my Facebook page, my email, I am giving everything to you except my credit card number. But if you really want that, I'll give that to you because I've memorized it. Even the 3-digit number. The public service announcement, the 21st Space Wing did, that has the pictures. My son's voicemail, it's a shorter voicemail than what I played here. And it is long. It is tough to hear, and I understand that. But I don't want you to forget it. Suicide has a rippling effect. The choices that we make have a rippling effect. And my sons will have to live with that for the rest of their lives. I will too, but I'm an adult when it happened. But they have found resources, and I pray, please, if you're a person of faith, I would love a prayer for my son Ryan. Believe in that. But I want to be your resource. But I want you to remember to show up, to do something, to be intentional. Remember your homework. And I would love to hear feedback. I want to hear from you the feedback that you received from sending that wave emoji. When you go out to a restaurant next or a store, I want you to use that person's name. And if you don't know how to pronounce it, ask them. Ask them how to do that. Silence does us no good. We are in a war. And on this battlefield, there is no room for strangers. But together, we put one foot in front of the other. And we march forward and conquer. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hear a lot of stories on the battlefield about courage, about being fearless. I don't know about you, that's some courage right there. So I've heard that voicemail about a dozen times, and it cripples me every single time I hear it. So can you imagine, on purpose, close to 100 times a year, standing up in a group like this and purposely retelling that story, knowing you've got a wound like that, and then ripping that apart for strangers every single time. That's courage. How about another round of applause for Ms. Christy? Here's the other thing I'll tell you, and I want to impress this upon you. These stand downs, they're really important. But what's more important is that we stand up together every single day and address this as leaders at every single level. I'm not going to try and capture everything that Ms. Christy said because she said it way better than we could because she's lived it. You know, there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. So I'm not going to do that. but I'm going to just challenge you to understand this is not a Monday stand-down thing. This is an everyday thing. And this is an absolute epidemic. We could talk about all the statistics in the world, and there are many. Over 1 million people every single year commit suicide around the globe. So in the 40 seconds I've been talking to you just now, someone else committed suicide. So when General Goldfein issued that challenge to us about a year ago, never would have known that in 2019 we're on pace to have 150 plus airmen commit suicide. Then you start talking about the statistics with our veterans. But if you're anything like me, and anything like Miss Christy, one is too many. Okay. Pretty emotional conversation, certainly very hard because, like many of you, suicide has impacted your lives. Every time I'm sure that Miss Christy tells this story, people leave the room. They're overcome with all sorts of emotions, and people in this room right now are dealing with wounds that you cannot see. But it's important, again, to have these conversations, to show up, to be engaged, to fight that fight, to take on an adversary that won't be listed in any national security document, but is absolutely crippling our force day to day. I'm going to open this up, Ms. Christy, if you don't mind. Any questions or comments, that you would like to take right now? So I'll have this circulating around, but please, anyone questions or comments that you have right now from Ms. Christy?
Ma'am, I just want to say thank you. I'm a mother. My son has tried to do it twice. And the first time he tried to do it was when he was 8. And it was really hard for me not to blame myself and not to think that I've done something wrong as a parent. And so I want to know, how are you getting through the not blaming yourself as a parent? How are you going through taking that next step forward? How are you marching forth?
Thanks for the question. I'm sorry you've had to go through that. Thank you for being vulnerable to ask the question. A lot of times I don't have questions. People don't ask me questions, but it took a long time. So I just started talking about this a year ago, and it's been 12 years this year. So for me, it took 10 years to see the value in telling our story to other people. And it's scary. I got help. I've been in therapy for the 12 years, and my therapist has helped me get through that fear, the fear of failure, feeling like I was a failure. I still feel that. It eases. It's part of that hope that we have. But again, it was more my community, where my eyes were so shadowed by the pain and the hopelessness that I felt at times. I didn't want to be a mom at times, which is horrible to hear me say that, coming out of my mouth. But it took people in my life to help me realize what I could really do and what they saw within me. I had another son that was home that I needed to take care of. And he's helped a lot too. Use your community, use your resources, love on your son. People make choices. And no matter how we raised our children, they're going to make choices that deviate from how we felt like we raised them. And it's okay. It'll be okay. Thanks for the question. I know this is a tough subject. We knew that coming in. But I hope that you understand that crap happens in life, right? Shit happens. Yeah? It stinks. But when you add things to that shit, it becomes fertilizer. It still stinks, but beautiful things grow out of it. Let your community be your fertilizer. It won't stink as bad. If there's a question and you don't feel comfortable asking it in this large auditorium, please take a picture of my info, okay? I'd be more than happy to answer that question.
But just like everyone else said, thank you for coming out here. My family and I have actually experienced a suicide several years ago. My cousin did some things, made some bad decisions. So you, like I, have experienced this, where to some people this is just another story, another stand down day, another briefing. What would you recommend or suggest to people that haven't experienced this, don't know how to deal with it, but know someone that might be having a hard time, but the question's too hard for them to ask? Are you willing to hurt yourself? I'm a cop. Cops are notorious for, I don't want to say nothing. I want my gun taken. I don't want the squadron to think that I'm weak. What would you say to someone like that?
Thanks for the question. It is tough to talk about, and it's, you care about the person, but saying those words, are you thinking about hurting yourself? There is still a stigma. So I will tell you, 3 months after Don's suicide, Congress came through in mass question 21 on the EQIP. So I have a clearance, I've been through the EQIP, and now instead of have you sought behavioral health services, yes or no, it's have you ever sought behavioral health services for anything other than relational or deployment issues. People don't necessarily want to answer that truthfully because there is that stigma. I'll lose my clearance, I'll lose my gun. It's tough. I wish everyone would have to go through counseling or a mental health evaluation so then no one is singled out, right? If we all do it, part of the mission, part of your physical. But that's where you have people within your sphere of influence who feel comfortable asking that question. And that's when you get together with a group of people. It doesn't have to be one-on-one if you don't feel comfortable asking that question. Also, the suicide hotline, it is not only for you if you are in crisis. If you have someone in your community that you know is in crisis and you don't know what to do, that hotline is for you. You call that hotline, you say, I have a friend, and it's okay to say I have a friend. What do I do? Give me resources. Give me the tools that I need to help this person. So in my 3-minute video, I talk about everyone has a sphere of influence. And the average person has 44 people within their sphere of influence. That's without social media. I'm talking eyeball to eyeball, handshake to handshake, hug to hug, if it's appropriate. If you help one person, you're helping 45 people, and it's exponential from there. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but you see that there is a challenge there, bring someone in, an extrovert, someone who's comfortable asking those questions, because I guarantee you have someone that you know that can help you do that. It takes a team. It takes a community. I'll take one more and then have to skedaddle.
Ma'am, how you doing? Thank you, like everyone said, for coming out. I worked in flight safety for a while. We had, anyway, we used mishaps to teach other people how to avoid mishaps. Sir, one thing I was thinking of is if we had some sort of thing. It's amazing to hear your experience, ma'am. I think a lot of people think I'm active duty. I can't share it because I'm active duty. Like you said, I don't want to lose my gun. When I got suicidal, I did. My commanders stood me down for a little bit. Didn't have me fly. I didn't overall lose my flight status, but they worked with me to get me help. Like you said, my community helped me out. Got a lot of help. I think sharing those stories of good news stories about, hey, I got help, went to mental health, went to the chat, went on different things. I think that would do a lot of good to share active duty stories, or guard, or reserve, along with that. Have you seen that at any base where they've been able to do that? Maybe had a pamphlet or honestly the face-to-face interaction. And have you seen that work somewhere, ma'am?
I have. That's great. Segue into the last question, so thank you. Again, I'm lucky enough to be at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, and we have something that started off every year, and now we're doing it more often. It's called Storytellers, and it's during commander's calls where we have active duty personnel. I did share my story as a spouse, but it's mainly active duty personnel who come in and they talk about a challenge that they've had in their life. One of life's tests doesn't have to be suicide. We've had a number of those. We had, when I did Storytellers last year, we had a lieutenant colonel who was chief of the pharmacy department who had told her story when she was a captain. She had been prescribed Ambien and she took a whole bottle. She felt hopeless, and her roommate found her. And they put her on hold for 30 days, and she got treatment. And she just pinned on Colonel and PCS'd. So there are stories like that where people sought help. You know, if you think about the very high-profile suicides, the 3-star, the Rear Admiral, or Vice Admiral in the Navy, who took his life in Bahrain. Can you imagine the message that he could have imparted if he had gotten help? But it doesn't have to be a Vice Admiral. It can be anyone. I believe there were stories since General Goldfein called for the tactical pause, that people have been coming out more and more to tell their story. Thank you for being vulnerable today and asking that question and giving us a little peek into the battle that you waged. I'm glad you're here. I'm sure your family's glad you're here. And whatever it looks like to tell your story, you've got a story. If it's in a small group, if it's up on stage, if it's one-on-one, open yourself up, be vulnerable. Dr. Brene Brown talks about being vulnerable and how that's a signature of being a leader. It's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable and open up. But when you're genuine and you're transparent and you're vulnerable, that's the sign of a true leader. So thank you. I'm glad you're here.
More questions? While you're thinking about it, I want to share something else with you. So in 3 days, these shades will come up and we'll watch another airman's coin ceremony. We'll transition them from trainee to airman. About 800 or so every single week, about 42,000 BMTers. But as I often speak of to my DVs that come through here, there's still this mentality that we've got a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds going through basic training. I'm telling you, that's not the case. That's not the case. They come from every single walk of life, every single age, every single demographic. So why do I tell you that? It's because there's a lot of focus on our young airmen committing suicide. But you want to know the breakdown? The highest percentage of suicides are actually from the 45 to 55-year-old group, and the second tier is 80-year-old plus. Suicide does not care about race, religion, creed, boundaries, borders. It does not. So while the emphasis as leaders might be on our younger airmen, this is across every single demographic that affects every single person in this wing and beyond. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Again, this is a tough conversation, but we need to lead. And part of that is having these frank conversations with our team, our families. What else?
Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Beloved from the 637th ISS. I was out this weekend and just wanted to say thank you because I went to the Warhawk Gym and I was able to use it for after-hours access for the first time, and that was pretty cool. So wanted to also ask, since one of your big focuses is quality of life, could you share with us some of the other things you've been doing to get after quality of life for the Warhawk family?
So people talk about the challenges that come through the wing, and I don't want to belabor it because I know I want to really make sure that we're saving you time, and that's part of the quality of life. Because there's a lot of things that steal our time, that steal our joy, and they're usually not the big things. And it doesn't matter what group I sit down with. It could be the MTIs, it could be MTLs, it could be my civilians, it could be my young airmen. But I would say 95% of the issues that are raised to me are what I call installation issues. So what does that mean? Hey, it takes me 2 months to get my ID card. It takes me 3 months to get my kid into child care, into medical appointments. We've got 100+ personnel systems that we're trying to deal with, and none of them are user-friendly. My bandwidth is terrible, right? These are the things that are chewing up your time and collectively robbing you of your time with your family and your airmen's time. So instead of listing all the things that we're trying to do behind the scenes, I will simply say that all things infrastructure are things we're going after. But I also know that you're respectful and mindful that we're one of 266 joint partners in JBSA. So it's a challenge. Everyone's fighting for a finite amount of resources. But anywhere that your command team can fight for you and fight on the quality of life for your team. And so we're looking at better ways to do CTCs, to do 24/7 access, to make sure that I save your time wherever I possibly can. But just understand that the challenge inherent onto that is because all the things I just talked about, I don't own any of them. So that's painful for a guy that grew up as a mission support officer, right? That's used to pointing to CE or pointing to COM or FSS and say, here's our priority of effort. Here's our clear plan, go do. We don't have that here. So I'm not going to get too far into that. Just know it's a struggle. And I would say my outer office, my front office staff probably spends about 75% of their time navigating around bureaucracy. And that's tough. And I'm sure you're feeling it at your levels too. So we need to keep having that dialogue about what we can do, because to be honest with you, our force deserves better, but in particular our enlisted force deserves better. 84% of the Air Force comes through these gates. We have this great monitor, Gateway to the Air Force. We recruit heavily on two things, technology and quality of life, and Lackland sucks at both of them. We can do better. You deserve better. Your families deserve better. The 5,000 plus unique visitors that come through these gates every single week deserve better. But don't let those frustrations stop you. Because I'm telling you, every single minute of frustration will add up to a collective fail point. We can't allow that to happen. But this is why we need to have these conversations. I will be relentless in my pursuit of saving you time, of going after these things, but I need your voice to be heard. That's the only way we're going to get better as a force. So I recently took a group of our airmen and 502nd partners to the Toyota plant. Where's my lawyer? No federal endorsement intended. There you go. Okay. But when we're there, it's pretty interesting. There was a lot of big takeaways, a lot of principles, but for the scope and size of what they do, it's a pretty awesome machine. It's kind of the opposite of joint basic. It's efficient, right? It's a great conversation, great C2. But if you look at their core value tree, one of the branches on there says, there's always a better way. There's always a better way. So I think that applies to everything we do. And taking this back to the conversation of today in our fight against suicide, I don't want you to live. I don't want you just simply to live. I want you to thrive. And I think that's the mentality that we have to have when we wage war. It's not enough to get by. We owe each other more than that. We need to thrive as a team, as a family. And that's where it starts. It starts right here having these kind of conversations. Continue to challenge us and your leadership team to make your lives better. But any ideas, any conversations that should be happening at all echelons. Because again, I'm telling you, there's no magical formula for this. We're not going to figure this out today. We're not going to figure it out tomorrow. But we need to continue to aggressively pursue this and fight this at every single turn. What else?
Sir, when I read about Washington, I find out what drove him. I wasn't there, but I can find out what our first president, what drove him, what passion drove him, what made him get up every morning. And when his men at the time, all his men, they were basically they were lacking clothing, shoes, and where he thrived, somehow he kept on. As a result, we're here today. For you, Jason Jenners, why do you get up every morning? What's your passion? What's inside of you? What drives you? If you lost everything else, what would you like to have left? We're inspired by your leadership, no doubt. But what drives Colonel Jason Jenners every day? 7 kids? Wow, that's a lot. What drives you?
So today was a 2001 Honda Odyssey. That's what drives me today. That's a pretty tough question, but I'll answer simply this. And I talk about personal priorities because they will translate to your professional qualities. So I'll sum it all up in 3 words: faith, family, flag. That's what drives me. Faith, family, flag. But I need you to have yours. Because when times get tough, and they will, what are your anchor points in life? What makes you thrive? So I've been asked that similar question a lot during my life, and everyone's got different stories as far as why they enlisted, why they still wear the uniform. So my why has changed a lot over the years. But I recently addressed a group of ROTC cadets from Ole Miss, and they asked a very similar question. So I gave them the faith, family, flag. But then that why, I told them that why is looking back at me. That's my why. My why is you. My why is your families. That's what drives me each and every day. Because whether you serve 4 months, 4 years, or 40 years, this thing's coming off. So what's your legacy going to be? What do you want to be remembered for? So I mentioned it on Friday night for my new Master Sergeants. That new stripe, the only thing that entitles you to is serving your airmen. That's it. But everyone is principally across the board. This needs to be a value-based organization. So when I say that, that means we all need to adhere to the core values. But more importantly in all that conversation is two things. Two things. No matter who you are, when you come into work every single day, you want to feel like you're valued. And then number two, right behind that, you want to feel like you're adding value to this fight. So you think about that. If we're consistently a values-based organization, whether that be faith, family, flag, or something else that drives you each and every day, make sure you think about that. When we're talking about suicide, let's talk about ways that we can impassion and empower each other. And usually that comes down to those two things, is how every single day I can value you as an individual. I can treat you with dignity and respect and mean it, and then turn around and give you the power, the tools, and the resources so you can add value to the gateway of the Air Force. And by the way, as a commander, I'm honored. But more importantly, as a wingman and friend, I appreciate you. I love you and your families, and I'll do everything I possibly can to continue to drive that why home. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be forming up for the wing photo behind. We'll have group leadership stay, group leadership and above stay here, and everybody else to start heading down the PRC pad. There's spots located, Captain